So I'll have our panelists introduce themselves.
Hey, so I guess I'll go first. All right, hi all. My name is Stephanie Castillo. I am a graduate student at Vanderbilt University. I am ending my 5th year, soon to be 6th-year student, and I am studying science communication, specifically looking into how to produce science communication videos specifically for underrepresented students, and the production process that goes into that. I'll hand it off to Michael.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Hopkins, and I am originally from North Carolina. I went to undergrad at North Carolina Central University, and I am now a second-year PhD student at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and I study biochemistry. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Black Scientists Matter. And I'm happy to be here today.
That's right, North Carolina's in the building. What's going on, fam? It's This is Dr. Nehemiah Mabry, as I'm formerly known. I'm in North Carolina right now, Raleigh, North Carolina. I am a structural engineer. I work in bridge design, and I am also the founder of STEM Media, which is a digital media company that provides inspirational, educational, and creative content for the STEM community. And I'm excited to be here to talk about community building with you all.
Yes, thank y'all so much. Michael, I didn't know you went to Central. I went to A&T, so we're gonna not hold that against each other today while we're doing this conversation. So again, y'all, yes, thank you, Pride. I saw it, I was excited. But
NC State.
Oh, right, yes, you all are there as well. But all love. So let's get started with the first question. I really wanna know, I want you all to share your stories of building community. You know, what was your mindset when you were entering graduate school as it related to having a community? What were you thinking about when you were trying to, you know, build and find your community in graduate school?
Well, I'll kick it off, man. I think that just because I'm unmuted, I will say that community building, first of all, there are a lot of intangibles that you all have been learning that it takes to successfully make it through graduate school, not the least of which is having a community, having a support group, having people that you can lean on. I would say that it's no less than 40% of what's necessary, in my humble opinion. And so as I began to kind of go throughout, I think my thought was, how can I fuel the imagination that I have, the why, the picture of myself in the future? And what other better way than to get images and to connect with other people who are at various points along the journey? Well, as I climb, I can lift, and as I continue to move forward, I can be lifted as well. So my mindset was, how can I find things that can continue to fuel the motivation that's continuing to push me forward? And so that was my mindset going into community building. And we can get into some of the details, but that was sort of my motivation.
Okay, I think I can go next. I think it's a African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think that's especially true in grad school. Nobody has all the answers, and you know, you're going to be going, it's like a new journey for everybody. And I think it's always helpful to have partners along that journey, because grad school is a unique challenge in and of itself, and nobody has all the answers. So it's good to surround yourself with other people who have different backgrounds and experiences so that you guys can go together.
Awesome. And so I just want to say that I felt like I was a little bit spoiled in my undergrad. I was part of McNair Scholars, so I was already part of a community that's like helping me grow and thrive to like mold me into going into graduate school. And also had a really hands-on research advisor that I worked with who was like, you know, really hard, but he like put in the time to like make me a better scientist. And so I kind of had that same expectation going to grad school. So when I go into grad school, ended up coming up to a point where I realized that my first advisor is not necessarily my mentor. And that's when I had to kind of pivot and build my own community and my own support system, because I felt like, or I thought that I was going to get all of that from my one person, because that's what I was used to in my undergrad. And that's not the case in grad school sometimes. And so I really had to look outside of the department, look for other resources to build my community.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that point because you said something I really liked, Stephanie. I think it's really important to note the differences between undergrad and grad school, especially as it regards to community building. So in undergrad, you know, you're taking classes with all your friends, you guys are studying together outside of class. Like it's very interactive and very collaborative. I think in grad school, the focus is a little bit different. And you also have to think about the differences in the backgrounds of people in undergrad. In undergrad, most people are like, you know, 18 to 20, 25, and they're all, you know, similar backgrounds. But in grad school, you're going to have people who are, you know, could be 30, 40 years old, married with children. And so you have to understand that like the social dynamics of community building in grad school are going to be very much different than undergrad. And that was something that I didn't expect, especially those coming from HBCUs. You'll note the difference very well. That in undergrad, it's a lot easier to build a community, I would say, in grad school. So it's something you definitely have to work.
Yeah, I think that you all like already put it perfectly. Just the fact that some of us might come in with, you know, like Dr. Nee had this really idealistic kind of perspective of like, okay, how can I reach forward and backward the whole time to stay motivated, which I think is really great mindset to have. Some of us come in prepared or expecting a similar experience to undergrad, which like just doesn't always, that's not always the case. You know, I always want to let you all know like everything about grad school, there's no like one experience, which is why I'm so excited to have this panel to talk about these different experiences and also the different mindsets, but just thinking about maybe where you all are in your mind and as you're preparing to build community, which way are you thinking, which way are you kind of having in your mind, and is that going to be helpful for you when you're moving forward, or are you expected for maybe a potential change like Stephanie experienced? So what was like the most important piece for you once, you know, like I know Stephanie, you said you kind of had to do a pivot in your expectations. What became the most important thing for you when it was time to start building community? And I want you all to answer, but I'll have Stephanie start.
Yeah, so I kind of, this is like my story when you like follow me on Instagram and stuff like that. But so my first advisor, I felt like I wasn't, I'm just going to be like honest on here, but I felt like I wasn't really set up for success. So usually like when you go into grad school and you join a lab, at least for me, I was expected to kind of like hop on an already established project that's almost near the end. So the point is to kind of build up your skills to the point that you can become independent on your own research. So I wasn't given a project when I joined the lab. I joined the lab because I did a summer RE with this professor, and I liked the engagement that I had with the professor. But the dynamic within like the year and a half from graduating into going into grad school kind of changed. And it got to the point where, since I was so used to having so much like support in my undergrad, and when you're kind of in grad school, from my dynamic with the professor, I was just kind of like left to figure things out on my own. And I just needed a little bit more structure and a little bit more guidance and a little bit more mentorship in the case. And so I kind of, you know, feeling already insecure, like having the imposter syndrome. I was like the only Hispanic girl in my cohort. And also like, there was only one other Black guy and then everyone else just was white. And so then, you know, I just like already I don't have my community. I don't have my family. I'm in a new environment, and I just kind of started drowning, and it got to the point that I felt ashamed because I know what I was doing when I felt like I was expected to know what I was doing. So when it finally got to the point where my professor was kind of hounding me of like, hey, you're not really making progress. You have this exam coming up. You know, you need help thinking through things. And I'm just like really struggling. But that interaction didn't really go as planned. When they heard that, they took it as like me not like, I don't know, but they ended up saying that like the way that I spoke was more master's material than PhD material. And that's kind of started my whole journey of like having to switch labs, having to start finding people that would advocate for me, that would actually support me and believe in me to push through. And yeah, that's, I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah, it just kind of took like a really negative interaction with my advisor to kind of push me to start seeking other people, because obviously this person wasn't there for me.
I can go next. So I would say there are different levels of community building in graduate school. So you're going to have your relationship with your mentor. And then I think it's very important to have like professional mentors that are not your primary research advisor. So those would be like people who are, in career positions or at the school that you're at that are not in your lab, but are in areas that you're interested in learning more about. And then you also have your community building of your peers. And I think that they're all different and they all serve very unique purposes. And it's important to have people who, as Stephanie was saying, who are advocating for you in every single way. I think, at the peer level, it's easiest to understand why it's important to have friends, because you have to do, work together, homework together, problem sets. It's good to just have people you can unwind with. And then just, it's very important to have a mentor who cares about helping you get to where you want to go. And that could be very different from where they want you to go. But it's important to have a mentor who understands that, it's about your training and your mentorship. And you have to really shape that mentorship into what you want it to look like. And then also another point that I think is very important, something I'm still working on, is finding community outside of graduate school. So you don't have to be a graduate student 24/7. And I think early on, especially when you start like your first year or two, when you're like primarily in your classes, you're choosing labs or like choosing your research mentor, you're really hyper focused in graduate school. And I think it's very important to understand that the real world is still going on outside of graduate school. So, don't lose sight of.
Definitely. And I always say, like, there are mentors and then there are mentors. And, a mentor is someone that you can go to and they have been down the path before. That's someone who can help show you the way. And not to mention advisor, just to kind of quickly touch on that, really an advisor doesn't necessarily have to be invested in you. They just really advise you on the academic aspects of your journey. They care about that research paper getting done or whatever the case may be. Really good advisors sometimes cross over into the mentorship, unfortunately, as Stephanie just shared. She didn't have that at first. She didn't have an advisor that was also a mentor. But an advisor could really be all about themselves, truthfully, and they're just advising you on how to do things that fit their program. So advisors aside, if you happen to get an advisor that's also a mentor, or you also find a mentor that may or may not have a formal role, it's also, as Michael was saying, good to maybe even find an additional column or category for mentors, people who may not totally understand what you're doing. You try to break down your research, that's fine. They're not going to grill you on the details of your research. But man, if you want to get something off your chest, they're going to be there listening to you. If you just want to be like, man, today was just rough, right? Let's just shoot the breeze, or let's just go veg and watch a movie or whatever. And you just let them know how things are going. I think that is good as well. And so it's nice to have different layers, as Michael alluded to. It's fortunate sometimes we have people that can transcend, but at the same time, it's also fortunate we have people who aren't able to bring a lot of the baggage from the lab into your interactions. So I think that's really good. To go back to your original question, Lonte, I want to add that I felt that one of the most important things was to basically give and you will receive. So like I was always putting myself out there, and a saying that became very dear to my heart was, there's something inspiring about inspiring. And by that, I mean, when I go out and I look to maybe reach out and inspire some of the undergraduates, or I get involved in the community, that somehow opens up, like invariably opens up opportunities for me to be poured back to. In fact, I met some of my best friends by going and serving on another graduate student panel for undergrads who wanted to know about grad school. I ended up kicking it off with a person that was right next to me. Come to find out, he attended like the church that I was attending, and we just really kicked it off. And to this day, we're really one of the best friends. But that came as a result of me really seeking to give some of the things that I was ultimately looking for. And that served to be sort of the catalyst for that community that became my own.
Ooh, I love all of these answers. These are great. And y'all know, we had all talked. I had a whole set of questions planned, but they are like giving some good questions in the chat. So we're going to just transition right over to these folks' questions because I feel like more are going to come. The first question I saw was from Asha. She asks, how do you avoid feeling competitive with your classmates when you're already trying to build a community?
That is a great question. Especially, that a lot of the culture of your program or your university will be decided prior to you getting there. And I think it's important that you, depending on how you doing your research prior to committing to a school. So, different programs and different schools have different, formats for how they recruit graduate students. But if you have an opportunity to go to the university and meet current students, ask these important questions about the community there. Are students that are currently there, do they tend to compete with each other, or are they very collaborative? I think that's a very important question because you don't want to be competing against the same people that you're trying to build a community with. And I think if you go to a hyper competitive school, that might be something that you have to consider. But I think that in choosing that, you'll still be able to find your specific community. And if there are people who are trying to compete with you and you're not trying to compete with them, then you know that those people you don't need in your community.
I think something that I kind of learned like, going through McNair, you're kind of taught like, it's like grad school, something different. And it's going to be harder, it's going to be challenging, like they focus on the science. But like one thing that we don't talk about is just like, yeah, like are these interpersonal relationships with like people, with like your advisors or with your peers and stuff like that sometimes you're not really prepared for. And that's where like, the struggle to kind of survive grad school comes in. And so I think one thing that I learned having such a negative experience with my first lab is like really trying to like a vibe check, like trying to figure out like who is there for me, who is not going to be there for me. So like, for example, when I went to like the department that I was first in, I saw someone in the chat saying like there's no like, faculty of color in their departments. Mine was the same way, where I only had like one Black professor. And so I like sought that out because I would like, and I was so happy to have him in my department because he like understood and was actually the one who like pushed me to like leave my first advisor's lab and to switch. Whereas like when I went to another professor, he was just so political in his answer that it was just kind of like he just like danced around my question and wasn't really, and like would side with the professor instead of like trying to help me like figure out. So sometimes you have to really put yourself out there, kind of like give out some information, be a little bit vulnerable in your sharing your experiences, just to see if like that person's going to be receiving it, and if that person would be someone that would advocate for you and be someone that you would want in your circle that will continue to support you throughout school.
Yeah, and this is y'all said some great stuff, and not really much to add to that. I came from I actually started at HBCU. I didn't mention that earlier, and then I got to PWI, NC State, and that's one of the first things I noticed. Like, man, this is competitive. When a teacher says do questions 1, 2, and 3, you better believe somebody's gonna do 4 and 5. And then next thing you know, you're the only one that didn't do 4 and 5. I'm like, I thought we were only doing 1, 2, 3, but they're trying to one up each other all the time. And so I got to the point for me where I realized I had to run my own race and just play my own game. Like, I don't have to get into the game with them, right? Like, if you are somehow getting pride and joy in these small moments of one upping here and there, I don't have to let that affect me. And I'll just end like this. So we'll move to the next question. I heard this yesterday, and I got to get y'all, my wife, this analogy. She heard it somewhere, but I don't know who originated. But if you've ever popped popcorn on the stove, you put all the seed, all the popcorn kernels in there, and they're in the same oil. However, you have no idea which kernel is going to pop first. And so it really doesn't matter which one pops first. It just matters that they stay in the oil, because ultimately it's going to get hot enough for everybody to pop. And when it's all done, it's not like you're going to be able to pick through all the popcorn and say, oh, no, here's the one that popped first. Yay, let's give it a award. No, it's all popcorn at the end of the day. So these 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever the case may be, who cares? Because when it's at the end of the day, if you pop, you stay in and you pop, at the end of the day, no one's going to know who got the 100% versus the 95%, or who finished the experiment first, whatever. Like, they can play that short-term game. You just continue to stay in the oil, and you'll pop when your time comes.
I love that. That was good.
Always with the gems.
I like that.
Next, I had to cite my source, though. I didn't come with it.
My wife.
Yeah.
Parentheses.
I think it's really important, piggybacking off Nehemiah, you run your own race. Like, don't worry about who's on your left and who's on your right, because most of the time you guys have unique backgrounds and you have unique goals. And so comparing yourself to the person next to you won't do anything for you. And it's the quickest way, as I say, like, comparison is the thief of joy. It's the quickest way to really ruin your day, is trying to figure out what somebody else is doing and why you can't be like them.
Especially when all our researchers are so different, and every type of experiment, like within even like inorganic chemistry, organic, like all of that, like it's so hard not to compare, because you see, like, I'm in my 6th year and half of my cohort already like graduated my 4th year, but at the same time it's like, well, that field has a different type of experimental design timeline compared to mine. So it's like not a fair comparison at all. And so you just have to kind of like, yeah, just stay focused on what you need to do.
I love that. Shout out to all of this advice. I'm loving it. Two people asked kind of similar questions. They're on either end. Tanya wants to know about finding a community of older students, while I'm forgetting, I can't find your name in here, I'm so sorry. But Jessica, yes, Jessica is the youngest in her program. So when you're on either end, right, maybe the youngest or the oldest person in your cohort or in your program, how do you go about finding a community of folks who you maybe can relate to better?
Yeah, I think it starts to go back to putting yourself out there. It's really difficult to build a community at the moment you need a community. It's not like a microwavable community. And so sometimes you got to go out and actually put yourself out there. And for my introverts, shout out to my introverts. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but again, like you want to be able to seed and plant the seeds. And so, for instance, one of the things I began to do when I got to grad school, this is a practical, actually start going to those workshops on dissertation writing, even though I was nowhere near my dissertation. And so I went into these things, and next thing I know, I'm meeting people who are like literally in the middle of their dissertation process, people who are expecting to graduate very soon. I hadn't even gotten to my quals. Matter of fact, my research topic wasn't even defined at that point. But it gave me an opportunity to meet some of these older people by going to the places that they were. And I was able to also educate myself and really know what was to come down the pike. So there's the benefit there at the older. As far as younger as well, that goes back to making yourself accessible. I think a lot of people here in the summit are in various places. And so I challenge the people who are almost done, people who are at the end of their journey, to say, hey, I'm here. Let me know if you have any questions. I just passed my calls. Let me know if you have any questions about how that went. And then there's your opportunity, because someone is coming in. And as you all know, grad school isn't like a direct straight line. It isn't always a defined path for you. And so that question mark is always there. And so really just saying, hey, I got the keys. I got a few keys, what I'm saying? It's something to make yourself available for the younger end of the spectrum.
I would say, just be very selective with who you let into your community. I think that it's way better to have one or two very close personal friends who are really there for you and really ride for you than it is to have the entire cohort. Because you'll find that the more people you let in, the more opportunity it gives you for people to like let you down or to hurt you or to not really support you. So just do your due diligence to really like vet who you let into your community, because you're better off to have a few good people than a lot of people who are just okay. And I think that, yeah, that's what I would say. If you're, the youngest or if you're the oldest, you can start by looking at maybe people who are similar backgrounds than you, but don't limit yourself to that as well. Because you never know who you can connect with and who could really be a valuable mentor or a resource.
Yeah, I think friends dynamic can kind of change throughout the program too. Like, the beginning of your cohort, they do a lot to like make sure everyone's together and everyone's, icebreakers and stuff like that, just to get you all mingling. But the second you guys join your labs, everyone is kind of like split off. So then it really takes effort to kind of like reach out and to like try to, build these friendships. I came into grad school married. So that kind of like, I was young with like the rest of my young cohort, but at the same time, because I was married, I couldn't really like do like, I'm not the type of person to go out and stuff like that, where I'm like a homebody to have a family to come home to. So that was just kind of hard. So, but I was able to still, kind of find some like older grad students, like people outside of my cohort to seek as like friends who are able to like kind of pass down their wisdom to me. But then, you got to keep some of like, there's like acquaintances and then like the close niche friend group that you kind of have. So like when you go to the department picnics, which can be so annoying, like you still want to be cool with everybody, but like you're going to have those people that you can vent to when things get really, really tough during grad school, and they can help you bounce through ideas and be there during all the challenges and ebbs and flow of grad school.
So dope. I've been like trying to catch up with the chat, y'all, too. So another question from oh my gosh. Oh, great. This is Kayla, I think, how do you build relationships with faculty outside of classes, right? Like maybe there's someone whose work you find very interesting or you think might be a good mentor, but you don't have that natural interaction of classes. Do you all have any recommendations for what they can do in that situation?
So I have two examples. So since my department doesn't really have a lot of like faculty of color, and I ended up finding out like just through like an email newsletter that like the engineering department was hiring a new professor, and he was a Hispanic professor, and that's like the first Hispanic professor that I've like heard about that was like in the field of research that I was kind of interested in. So I legit like emailed him and I was just like, hi, like I know that you're new, you're so exciting. And I was like, you're the only Hispanic professor in the field that I really know about. I would love to, like, I'm a Hispanic student. I would love to just kind of like meet with you during like for an hour, a half hour, just to kind of like talk about your research and just get to know your experience at like navigating academia. So just like keep it short and keep it simple, but like having that connection, like having that like something you can connect with is always helpful. And in terms of like seeking mentors in terms of like science outside of the classroom, there's always it's part of the faculty's job to help you no matter what the extent is. And sometimes I feel like the faculty put a lot of pressure on students to kind of like, you have to figure it out on yourself. And so if there's experts in your department know something that not your immediate advisor or research group knows about, then take that as an opportunity to be like, hi, Professor X, like I'm looking through, I want to adapt some of the stuff that I learned in the classroom into my research project. Is there a way that we can sit down for a few, for like half an hour to kind of discuss, like help me brainstorm some ideas of how I can apply your expertise into my area of research?
I would say, so as you're going through graduate school, and once you get your master's, your PhD, um, hopefully these professors that you're working with as a student are going to become your colleagues or your peers at some point. And I think it's important to try to navigate those relationships as such. So if you have like specific questions about your research interests, just stopping, maybe don't stop by the lab, but send an email, I have a question and I was wondering, since you're an expert, if we could just chat for a quick few minutes. And also, most of these professors love to talk about themselves. So if you can engage them on things that they're very much interested in, you can usually keep their attention for, 30 minutes, and you can ask any questions that you want. But I think it's important to really try to build relationships outside of your primary mentor, so that you can learn more about, the department, the school, careers in academia, and if that's something that really interests you.
Yep, totally. And just to add on to that, I think commonality is a really strong bond when you want to get to know people, right? So, and the question was specifically about faculty members. So I'll just go there, right? At the end of the day, they're just people. They're just like people. They're you just a few years ahead. That's really what it is at the end of the day. But there's this aura sometimes about the faculty members in your department that you directly speak to, the ones you call doctor every day. You know what I mean? But really, if you met this person in a totally different context, they'll be like, oh, what's up, Bill? And so this is where I found like digital becoming very helpful for me, because there were people who literally, if they were in my university, I would be afraid to speak to them. But because I connected with them on LinkedIn, or because I happened to find them in a group of other common interests, I was able to kind of build a rapport, and then conversations was able to go towards things that were maybe helpful for me in grad school. I'll give an example. There's a lady, I don't even know if she's on here or not. So shout out to Dr. Monica Cox if she happens to be out there. Anybody knows her. But there was a time where STEM media, when I began to build this thing digitally, I was putting out creative things that just are about STEM. And so I saw other people that were doing it. And some of the other people that were doing it were people who were faculty members at other universities. Monica Cox was one of them. She had like a little cartoon series. So we connected literally like on Facebook, like, oh, that's really cool. That's really creative. She saw some of the stuff I was doing. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I was doing some kind of cartoon thing. But because of that commonality, because of that shared interest, we began to kind of like communicate and stay in touch as I did with others online. And now that relationship is still there. as colleagues, but at the time, had it been us two in the same department, I promise you I wouldn't feel as comfortable talking to her. And so that really is a value of being able to reach out and really getting out of your context to where that person who would be in your context, someone that it would be hard to speak to. But in that context, they're just Micheal, you know what I mean? So go ahead and put yourself in those contexts and find those common interests, whether it's jazz, whether it's dance, whatever it is.
And I think that you, like, one, you gave us a perfect transition. Thank you, Dr. Nee, for talking about building digital communities. I think that is the beautiful thing about living in the world that we live in right now. I know there are a lot of things we can talk about that aren't perfect, but one of the beautiful things about being graduate students, people of color in graduate school right now, is that we can turn to a digital community to kind of create a space and curate something that we want. And so before I get into this question, I want y'all to know I have literally never met any of these panelists in person before. I met all of them through Instagram or Twitter. And, you know, like, we have built a relationship as a result. And actually everybody in the summit are people that I've met from the internet. And so I want us to talk about, you know, what made, you know, Stephanie, you start Future Doctors, Michael, you start Black Science Matter, and Dr. Nee starting STEM Media, and how has the digital community been, like, how did you even start to develop that so that people can kind of think about what they can be taking away when we leave this session?
Yeah, so I like started Future Doctors as more as like a science communication project, which slowly developed into like it being a community. And so I think things didn't like, you know, people will follow just because of the science that I was sharing, but eventually got to the point where I started documenting my experience of like having to switch labs from having experience with a toxic mentor. I also ended up failing my qualifying exam my 4th year after switching to a different lab. And then, so which led me to like leave my first PhD program and then try to seek a different one. So I've been documenting the whole process and just kind of being open about that actually opened like me being super transparent. And these are kind of topics that, like, you know, I hope no one ever goes through what I went through, but there is like, it does happen. It can happen, especially when as like people of color, we're just like, there's going to be some microaggressions. There's always going to be someone that's going to tell you that like, you're not going to be able to do it and stuff. And so just, we always feel like we're just so isolated and so alone, and that we're only, and especially if you're in a not so diverse kind of department, that like no one understands what you're doing. But it was through Instagram that like I found so many like awesome people, like and using hashtags like academic chatter, PhD chat, PhD life, especially on Twitter. That's like where everyone has started to become, like, both professors and graduate students have become very vocal about just like sharing their science, sharing the toxicity that academia can be, but also sharing their wins and exchanging just different types of information. So now, like, what I love about being a person of color is that we always, like, when there's things out there for us, or there's things there that are not like meant for us, we're like, we're just going to create our own. So that's literally like what we're all doing on our social media. It's just like building that community that we need. And through that similar interaction of having like similar journeys, is that we're all connecting with each other and relating to each other, supporting each other. And just by being open and sharing our experiences, we're making new friends, making new connections. And it's just awesome. I love it.
I agree.
So when I first got introduced into laboratory research, I was at UNC Chapel Hill. And so I came from North Central HBCU, and I was doing summer research at Chapel Hill. And it was very different being in a class that's majority Black when I'm learning about science, but then when I'm in the lab, I'm not seeing that many Black people. And I remember thinking, like, I know there's more Black people interested in science, they're just not directly in front of me. And so, you know, that really was the birth of Black Scientists Matter, was trying to figure out, you know, how can we bring in the different parts of this community together so that, you know, we can support each other. And so, you know, that's continued to build and continue to grow. And I think that one thing that I like to reiterate to people is, like, there are a lot of Black scientists, and there are a lot of Black people in science fields. There are a lot of Black people in graduate school. We're just very spread out. And so when you use digital platforms, you can really bring together, as you can see, over 100 people in this Zoom call alone. And so you find that there really is a community out there. You just have to make it an additional effort to, build it and foster it.
Yeah, man. Shout out to my fellow panelists for their communities. And yeah, so quick story how STEM Media started. I entered a video contest that was being hosted on multiple campuses about why you went into engineering and what were you doing to stay with engineering. So they said, create a video. And 9 times out of 10, the videos will look exactly like this. You sit in front of the camera, people say, hey, the reason why I chose engineering, which is cool. There's value in that. But for me, being a person who I like to think of as creative, I said, well, I make the videos. And so I entered the contest. It was sponsored by MTV, Intel, Facebook, I think was in on it. And I submitted it and kind of found out that it was, selected as a finalist. I got a call from a guy at MTV. He was like, yo, videos look like this. Like, are you an engineering major for real? Or are you just trying to play one? I'm like, no, I'm an engineering major. I want to create an image, right, that I actually saw of myself in the field of engineering. I'm no different than an athlete, person who's preparing for a big game. You know what I mean? So that went well. It won the grand prize. And so from there, that began to kind of catch the attention of people. Got to me. And he's like, yo, this is great. Fortunately, at NC State, our dean is a Hispanic gentleman who has been very supportive of me from day one. That spurred into the desire to create more images of what was already in here. Now, here's the thing. You look to your left and right, you're in the lab, as Michael just said, or you're in a class, and you don't really see a whole lot that you're like, oh, yeah, that's me. I feel that. Especially if you're coming from a place like an HBCU or a community where it's like, yeah, you're used to being around. You feel very at home. But when you get to this new environment, your home, in many ways, as corny as it sounds, becomes up here for a little while. Like your home is here. You just start to picture like what you want to become or where you're trying to head to. But I began to start saying, how can I start making these images more prevalent in the eyes of other people who may not have that same vivid imagination? And so it became a process of finding images online and curating them all together, because I knew I wasn't the only person in engineering but liked the NBA. I knew I wasn't the only person who liked food, but was also in the science method. I knew I wasn't the only person that liked the fashion, but also trying to get a STEM PhD. And so really bringing all these images together in effort to symbiotically create a realistic visual of what was ultimately inspiring me and making me feel. And so in other words, it was an effort to see it before I actually saw it that actually helped me to see it, right? And so that began to attract other people who really resonate with those same things. Oh man, that's a really funny meme. I thought I was the only one who thought about Kendrick Lamar when I heard that particular scientific concept. I thought I was the only person, whatever the case may be. Then all this really comes together and began to form organically a community online and digitally. And so hence I've been able to connect with people like Alante, Black in Grad School, and Stephanie and Michael, because these are the same images that they represented on their platforms. And so that's really how it began to really grow. And just to kind of, again, not get too inspirational, but again, like, you have to see it before you see it. And then eventually what you see will become real. And so that was really the process of STEM Media. And that is the process of getting to grad school, seeing yourself on the stage, see yourself walking on the stage with whatever theme music in the background. Like, all that is very real for us who don't always see what we need to see in our immediate environment. And so that's where STEM Media as a digital community kind of spurred from.
I think that's so just dope. And I'm so grateful for all of you and your platforms, because like you all said, we're all serving in some ways different communities who are looking for something, different and the same, right? And just so you all know who are listening, you all are a part of the community. You all are literally making the point and taking the steps right now by joining this summit to create a virtual community. You have the foundation of a virtual community as a result of even being here. So know that you already done the first step, right? We're gonna wrap up soon. I don't believe the hour is almost over, but I saw a good question from Jessica asking, I found that even the most well-meaning people can make insensitive comments or be unaware of their own implicit biases against minorities. How do you gracefully dismantle stereotypes and ignorant perceptions of you without in the end isolating yourself or looking like an angry Black person? I know that's a loaded question, but if you all have any maybe quick tools or strategies or mindset shifts that Jessica and all of us, myself included, could use in the event that might happen, because that is a realistic situation existing in America.
So I can spearhead that question. I would say it's important to differentiate the people who are making an effort and you think could support you, but are just, have some shortcomings or have their own implicit biases, but they do mean well, between those who are just like willfully ignorant. And who there's really no hope for redemption. And there's going to be those people when you get to grad school, and there's going to be those people in life. But I would also say, try not to make it your responsibility to change somebody's mindset. You are already in graduate school, you're already in a new environment, you've left home, you're trying to build your own community. You don't need to take on any additional burdens of somebody else's responsibility, really. So, if there are people who you build a relationship with and you find that, there's some things that are insensitive or that they could say better, that's maybe pull them aside, talk to them about why what they're saying is incorrect or, disrespectful. But really differentiating between those who are worth investing your time into and those who won't see any benefit from it. And don't overextend yourself trying to serve somebody else's implicit biases. It's not your job to really defy the stereotypes. It's your job to be yourself. And by being yourself and being excellent as you will, you'll find that people will change their own stereotypes or how they view you.
Yeah, no, I first just say, I get it, man. It's really tough. And, like I said, I'm usually on the interviewer side of the equation, so I never really share a lot about my experience, but I definitely had people look at me and say, why are you getting a PhD? You all don't get PhDs. I've definitely had someone in the lab who thought it was cool to always call me a rapper's name as a cool nickname. I've had all that crazy stuff, right? And if you let that stuff seep in, or do like Michael said, make it your responsibility, almost show them, you can get exhausted with grad school and trying to prove that person's wrong. And so I do say that you have to, first of all, you have to get some strong mentals, right? And going back to my original question, their perception and their opinion and their ignorance is not your reality. You create your reality, and just really understand that, because if you contemplate and you think about it for too long, not saying that you should let the ignorance go on and just kind of ignore it. I mean, you should definitely, if there's a time for you to speak up, you should speak up. But if it's a comment and you move on, y'all not even in the same environment, you can't let that comment ride on your shoulder the rest of the day. You literally got to find a way to say, listen, you don't exist anymore. Take that mug and throw it off to the side, and then go on and continue to create your reality. Because you know what? In my reality, we do get PhDs. In my reality, my name is Nehemiah Mabry, which doesn't sound like a rapper name at all, but that's my name. I got a PhD. And yes, I'm a person of color, right? So here are the things that you got to realize. You create your reality, and as these things come to try to infiltrate your reality, develop the mindset of knowing that, listen, what I do, what I decide, that ultimately becomes what's true. I think Les Brown says someone else's opinion doesn't have to come, never accept someone else's opinion as your reality, or it's not what you call you, what you answer to. It's what you allow to seep in that ultimately has the effect. And if you make an intentional effort to say, all right, that was ignorant, I'm not in that environment right now, let me go ahead and put on some music, let me go ahead and get on my online community, connect with the people that I vibe with, then you will continue to move forward and you will successfully create the reality that some people just can't see it.
And also differentiate between a microaggression and a real life aggression. And if somebody is doing things that are actually hurting you, harming you, or hindering you, at that point, you should go above them to, a supervisor, a mentor, or a program director, and have that situation handled, because you shouldn't have to deal with the additional stress of racism while going through grad school. Unfortunately, it's a reality that people of color have, but at the same time, if there are things you can do to mitigate it, take advantage of that. So that, because again, grad school is hard enough already. And Black grad school, being a minority grad school, is going to be additionally hard. So there's going to be a lot of battles to fight. So make sure you're picking the ones that are worth it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel I remember just seeing some comment on Twitter of just brown and Black people are always feeling that we have to play the role as also the activists within academia to try to like if we see something being done to us, like we don't want that to happen to the rest of our community. So, but again, like that's exhausting, and there's only so much you can do, especially if like that person's just like, you know, we had this one kid in my department who would literally, you know, use those types of things, say statements of just like, oh, we got the NSF just because you're a minority, kind of like statements where you're just like, you know, you just know that like, that person is just, you're not going to change their mind. So just like not to interact with it. So, it's, you know, we had an instance in our department where just a comment just took a step way too far. Like you have to, it sucks that we have like take the role of like doing what's right because it's our emotional labor, but at the same time it's just like sometimes the departments are just like unaware of it and the faculty aren't aware of it, and faculty aren't trained to under like there's no like racial implicit bias type of training for these faculty members, and not even trained how to be mentors sometimes in the first place. So you have to really bring it to their attention and to like and kind of be, if you're willing to like kind of be to take the step up and to kind of force them and push them to cultivate an environment that's going to be inclusive and safe for everybody that they're trying to bring into the department. So it's just finding that balance is hard, but also don't think it's your job to do it. it's you know, it's such a, someone put, this can be a webinar in its of itself. And it's like, for real, like how do you navigate microaggressions like one-on-one?
Yeah, seriously. One thing I just want to share that I remember like dealing with this in my first master's and PhD program. If you are new to the story, this is a story. I quit and I'm in another PhD program now. So I remember talking to my mom about this, like dealing with those microaggressions and what to say. And she gave me some really kind of what I think is concise piece of, I call it a tool, like just look like in your pocket, just like, well, what do you mean? And just very, very confused.
That's how I responded, Alante, to the, you all don't get PhDs. I was like, oh, what do you mean? It was like, no, I'm just, you know, you kind of watch them film on yourself and they realize that they kind of messed up with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
And that's a quick one where you don't have to do a lot of emotional labor and you can just keep on going with your day.
Have you seen that TikTok of like someone was saying, someone mentioned, or it was like this person playing two people, and the one person was just like, oh my God, your accent's so funny. And she's like, what do you mean it's so funny? That I know two languages? And he's like, no, like your accent. And you're like, no, it is kind of funny that you only know one language and I know two. Oh my God, I totally I totally understand that. Like, that is hilarious. So you're just a monolingual and I have the brain capabilities of just like learning two languages. That is so funny that you only know one language. And he's just like, just stunned that like the roles were reversed.
Right.
Anyways, that was so stupid. Just wanted to say that because I love TikTok.
Yes, I love TikTok too. Oh my gosh, I need to get back on there. I've been slacking. Well, before we wrap up, there are definitely some good comments and questions, you all. The great thing about everything being virtual is you can reach out to all of the panelists and talk to them and get more advice, follow their stories, follow their advice on social media. So let us know where we can find y'all.
So I'm on @FutureDoctors with a PH. I'm also dropping in the chat a virtual like mentoring network. It's a resource that I used when I couldn't find, like when I had to switch labs and I didn't know who to turn to within my own department. So there's actually like a virtual like mentoring type of like, it will pair you up with people. Dang, I just entered it twice. So I just entered into the chat. And then also like reach out to me if you want any questions about navigating switching labs or dropping out of PhD programs or switching into PhD programs. And also another, just before switching, ABRACAMS and SACNAS or any other type of like diversity type conferences is like the best place to find mentors of your immediate community, as like extra support outside of just your initial advisor. But yeah, but that's it.
Cool. This was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for hosting us, Alante. You guys can follow me or follow Black Scientists Matter on Instagram @Black Scientists with an S. matter. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Mr_Hopkins8. And I'm always happy to chat more about diversity in science or anything you're interested in. So feel free to hit me up.
All right, yep. I'm just gonna go straight to IG at STEM Media, STEMEDIA, STEM Media with one M. The logo has a couple of mathematical symbols in it. You shouldn't miss it. Or you can look at my name right here on Zoom, Nehemiah. I'm on Instagram as well as an individual. And I would love for you to be a part of our community. I also opted in that too. ARL Network. I don't know if that came up during the summit at all. There's another listserv out there with a lot of faculty members of color that are very supportive. It's just a listserv email where they celebrate each other's wins. And so that's another resource I want to throw out as I share my information.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much. Let's give a clap emojis in the chat box for our panelists sharing all of these amazing notes. Y'all, we've got 4 minutes to our next session. We're going to be over at the other link talking with Jessica about personal branding. I hope that you all have enjoyed this. Day 2 is almost done. All right, y'all. See you in a minute.
Thank you, Ante.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.